Reading some of your annual comprehensive financial report here, and it looks like ridership is down and expenses is up, and it's been going up for the last 10 years. Are you federally restricted from charging certain people more money and other people less money? And what I'm saying, like if somebody who could afford more to ride the bus, say a businessman who's saving on parking, driving down to Providence, doesn't have to pay to park, would you be able to, is there a federal law that says, no, you have to charge everybody the same amount? If somebody had an EBT card, could you say, look, you get to ride for free because you have a certain pass? Do you know if there are guidelines to that? Because that seems like a way of getting revenue up.
Yeah. So to answer your question, to start, there is federal rules around certain populations that should have reduced fare passes. And then our state has a free fare program. And then from there, everyone else basically pays the same thing. So that is something we'll be exploring as part of a study are some of these services we're talking about, for that type of speed and direct connections, do they cost more? Is there a higher fare related to those that helps us then offset more expensive services, potentially with less ridership? So there's nothing preventing us from moving away from a one state, one rate type scenario, but we'd have to be, I think, methodical about it. Our base fare is already on the higher side of similar sized agencies.
One other thing, a couple of things that stood out to me in this report, and I don't know if you're a finance director, I don't know if you can answer this now, or if you want to defer to it and get back to me or whatever. And one of the things was the paratransit operations. It costs $15 million, and it brings in operating revenues of $450,000. Am I reading that right?
450. So our financial report breaks out those revenues. So $450,000 is actual riders paying for their service. We have a lot of contracted trips through BHDDH and a few other partners. That's a contracted rate, and that flows separately. But that service in general is federally required. Within 3/4 of a mile, you have to provide ADA transportation. It is expensive, but it is a lifeline for folks. And right now we're running it statewide I think it's going fairly smooth actually. And I think this is the type of thing we have to be looking at is, we could continue running a statewide paratransit service. The cost per trip is going to be higher than other models, but it's going to provide a really valuable service to folks. And those are the types of trade-offs I think we'll be looking at is, what do we as an agency and as a state want to be doing? And I think that's a really good point that you raise.
Yeah, it's quite a gap. I mean, if that could be narrowed somewhat, that's a lot of money to be left on the table, essentially. But that was just one thing that stood out to me. It was myself and a colleague in my caucus that went through this, and we looked at a couple of other issues. On the capital bus purchases, where we're going to electric, and I know we do get some kind of grants from the federal government. Is this still costing us more to produce the electric buses, even with the grants, as it would be if you just went with the traditional buses that we're using now?
So in general, the gap between a diesel bus, a hybrid bus, and an electric bus is narrowing significantly. Mostly with diesel buses just getting more expensive. So I think there's that change in the market that we're actually getting ready to go out to bid, and we'll get some firm pricing numbers on this. But so that's narrowing. There is the infrastructure side of this, but a lot of these grants have outright covered the upgrade cost. So with the R line, which is 14 buses, 20% plus of our ridership, we were able to do that project with a combination of actual Volkswagen settlement funds, low-no grant funds, and then our formula grant funds. So all we had to put up was our regular formula funds that we would have used for a bus purchase, and all those additional sources covered the gap. That's a unique circumstance, but it's made a big impact for us. But we have to be really thoughtful going forward because, again, the price differences between the different models it's very much compressing, and it's surprisingly expensive for a diesel bus now. So,
Right. So what you're saying is probably revenue neutral, because what you're saying is because you were able to get money from Volkswagen, the settlement from Volkswagen, et cetera, the purchases of the electric buses would probably be the same amount. Factor in everything that you just said.
Yep.
It's costing you about the same amount that it would cost you to purchase the diesel buses. And what you're saying is that the electric buses, the prices are coming down.
All right.
So would it be advantageous to wait to purchase them a couple more years as they come down more, or were you afraid you were going to lose out on federal grants by waiting? Is that the thinking behind that?
I mean, the biggest challenge with the electrification is the infrastructure. It's making sure the power is available, right? That's the really expensive part of the whole thing. But it takes a lot of time to kind of plan that. We do have federal funds awarded by the previous administration to electrify everything coming out of our Newport garage. That's a similar situation where essentially all the upgrade costs would be covered. In terms of like modifying our day-to-day capital program to say, hey, what are we buying? What's our permanent decision on purchases? We're still kind of figuring that out. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
Yeah, you're still trying to find out if it's revenue positive.
Right.
You haven't narrowed that. I get it. And is there a foreseen savings in using electric buses? I mean, other than buying the diesel fuel, does it come with freelance and externalities to these buses where you have to service them more, or I don't know, you have to change the batteries every so much years, and it all comes out to be, there really is no saving, but other than the environment issue?
there is far less maintenance. There's just far less moving parts on these, and there's ancillary benefits. We're not buying oil. There's a lot of if you walk through our garage, there's a lot of investment in those facilities to deal with fumes and chemicals and all sorts of things that we put a lot of time into compliance on. So the global picture, we've only just deployed these buses about a year ago in February, so we're still learning from this. But in terms of a day-to-day cost, they are lower than the diesel buses.
Okay. All right. I got one more question that goes back to the comprehensive financial report. There's two things that stuck out to me when I read this report. And the other one is when I look at the operations costs and the salaries are almost $6 million, $5 million, $983,000. And the fringe benefits are $6 million and $796,000. Is the fringe benefits more than the salaries for these employees?
No,
Am I reading
close.
something wrong?
It's close. Fringe benefits are probably like 80% of salaries.
Right.
So and that includes pension, healthcare costs, dental, vision.
All right. All right. I got a lot of questions about this report. If I could get together with someone at one time, I'd like to go over this. All right. Thanks.
Absolutely.